But yeah, it is pretty crazy when you think about it, because you're just kind of sat there with these top academics and you're here for a while and you almost forget, I think even the other day I was looking on, I was on LinkedIn, and then I saw one of my professors who also ended up being a supervisor in second year got nominated for some high award. And I just forget, like, I'm with these people like every day in supervisions or in lectures. And I think, remembering the opportunity you have there and making the most of it, like you said, through asking questions is really important.
Hello everyone, welcome to Cambridge from the Inside. Today we're here with a new guest. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Nikola. I'm a third year economist here at Trinity Hall. So yeah, I have my final exams and graduation just around the corner.
Nice, exciting. So today we're going to be talking about studying economics at Cambridge. We're going to go through everything about course structure, how economics is different to other universities, how Nicola's found the 3 years. To start off, Nikola, we have like a lot of prospective students who watch the podcast, trying to decide which degrees to do. And just for anyone who's unsure, could you explain to us what actually is economics?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. I think if you ask most people what economics is, they'll probably just say something about money, kind of. And I guess that's probably part of it. But really, I mean, when we speak about economics and specifically about studying it, it's all about how we solve kind of like the fundamental problem that, in the world we have limited resources. So how do we try and allocate those resources to meet what's an unlimited amount of wants and desires that people have? So how do we kind of allocate resources? So that's really kind of the problem that we're trying to solve when we look at economics. And that can be divided into, so many different branches. Some that people probably, especially studying economics or even not, might have already heard of is microeconomics and macroeconomics. So microeconomics, you could probably kind of deduce, looks at kind of like smaller scale things. So you look at kind of the allocation of resources or decision making on a smaller scale. So individuals, how do they allocate their budget between buying different kinds of goods to make them as happy as possible? Firms, how do they compete against each other? And then macroeconomics, you're looking like a larger scale, like governments, for example, running countries. How do they allocate their budget between different policies and investing in different industries? So you have all of those different areas of economics, but yeah, fundamentally they kind of all come back to this one idea of how do we effectively or most effectively allocate our resources.
Nice, yeah, that's really cool. Because I mean, there is an economics A level, but it's not a prerequisite to study economics. So, what kind of, like, whether it's A levels or interests, do you think students tend to have when they decide to choose economics?
Yeah, I mean, I think. I'll first speak slightly more broadly and then specifically about kind of like the Cambridge course. I think more broadly, obviously a lot of people do tend to, I think, kind of study economics and go into it, but it's not a prerequisite. I don't think it should be. A lot of the intuition and the skills you need, you can develop in a lot of other subjects. So I think politics is probably another big one. Like I said, it's specifically about macroeconomics when you're considering governments, allocating resources, what policies to implement. That very much ties into politics. I think that's kind of clear to see the connection there. Other subjects as well, and this links what I said about linking to the Cambridge course specifically. The course here is very kind of like maths focused. So even if you didn't study economics, but you did maths, further maths, or even something like physics, for example, you have a lot of the skills you need to kind of study economics even at Cambridge and learn, because we tend to go through a lot of models which have a lot of maths and graphs in them. So if you even studied those subjects but not economics, you can pick up the course here pretty quickly, I think.
Nice. So I think you explained the politics side really well, and how someone who might be interested in politics might want to get into economics, but I guess it's also those who might be doing maths and further maths or just maths, but want to apply that maths to like real life things. Economics might be a good choice for them. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, here at Cambridge, we have a few modules throughout the years which are purely just kind of maths and stats. So there, again, you can kind of see how those skills would be applied. But even the other modules, microeconomics, macroeconomics, a lot of the analysis we do is through maths, because, what we try to understand when you learn economics at university is, for example, say you're reading the news, Trump, and that's probably quite topical. Trump has an immigration policy and it's going to have this effect on this industry. what we're trying to understand is the kind of the mechanism behind that. Why does this, one policy or one decision lead to this outcome? And at Cambridge, in the Cambridge course specifically, you do that by building up mathematical models, and you can see through the maths what the kind of like the process is and the step-by-step process leading to whatever that outcome is. And so using those skills, you can definitely put them to use in economics and use them to then, like I said, apply that to real world situations and kind of get an intuition of what's going on.
That's really cool. I think a lot of students would find that quite exciting that they can use their maths problem solving skills to end up with a very qualitative conclusion on like a real world situation. Just out of curiosity, what kind of things were the reasons why you chose to study economics?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the simplest answer to that question is just I enjoyed it at A-levels and GCSE, and it was one of my better subjects. And I think, something you enjoy and something you're good at is always a good mixture. The natural follow-on question is, why did I enjoy it then at A-level? I think part of it is definitely, I had good teachers who made the lessons fun, who taught it really well. But I think the biggest thing, and why I probably would have chosen economics anyway, is something I value quite a lot is, studying something practical. You're at university for 3 years. You want to be learning something that can have use after university when you go into the world of work. And I think economics has that. And the reason I say that is what I mentioned before. You learn here at this course mathematically, and it'll be similar at other universities as well, but you learn the mechanisms behind, how fiscal policy affects macroeconomic outcomes like inflation and unemployment, how monetary policy affects that. So, when you're reading the news, for example, you see a headline and you don't just kind of take it at face value. You have the thought process to understand what goes on to lead to that outcome. And I think that's something that is a bit practical. I think we'll speak about it later, but I'm going into finance after university, and there, having that intuition and that economic understanding is quite important. And so that's really why I wanted to study it, to get those skills that I'll need after university.
Nice. So would you say throughout your studying at Cambridge, when you'd watch the news, has the way that you interpret the news and how deeply you'd be able to take news headlines changed over the course of your degree?
Oh, yeah, completely. I mean, I think that's for two reasons. One is what I just described with the course, giving you that understanding of the news and what's kind of going on, how to interpret it, I should say. But then also, when you're applying for jobs and internships or whatever, as you move, I think, from A-level to university, everyone tends to, almost regardless of what you're studying, you start to pay a bit more attention to the news because you'll need that often when you go into the world of work. So I think that combination of studying economics, but also naturally reading the news more and paying more attention, has developed my skills in that sense quite a lot. And like I said, that's something that's really useful. And so I'm glad to have gone through that. Nice.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's really cool how it's such a, it's one of those courses that immediately has an effect on current affairs, and you can be have a part to play once you leave university. Coming back to the economics course at Cambridge, could you explain to us what the course structure is like, and do you have much freedom of choice when it comes to modules, and what kind of stuff you cover in the first year?
Yeah. I think the best way is, I guess, to just go through it year by year. So in year one, there's 5 modules. All of them are just compulsory. So you do micro and macroeconomics, which you also do throughout all the years. You have a quantitative methods module, which is essentially just maths and stats. Then you have history and politics modules, which are kind of self-explanatory, and they're obviously more essay-based. So there's not really much choice there in first year. But obviously, as the years go on, you get more choice. So in second year, you have microeconomics, macroeconomics again. You also have an econometrics module, which is again stats, which is kind of why I said earlier the Cambridge course is very maths based. But then you also get one optional module in second year, and then in last year you have 2 compulsory, which is micro and macro again. But then you get 2 optional modules, and I'm doing banking and finance and a paper called industry, which is kind of just all about competition between firms and regulation and that kind of side of things. So in first year there's not that much flexibility, I guess, in choosing your modules. Late in year 2 and 3 there is. And I think it would also be probably worth mentioning how they're examined as well, or most of it is in-person exams, just sitting paper, certainly in first year. There's a slight exception. You have half of your history module in first year is kind of like a coursework essay project. You have 2 days to do it, so it's quite intense. So it's kind of just locked in my room for those 2 days. But you have that, and then second year you also have an econometrics project, which is over, I think it was around 10 days for us, so a slightly longer project. And then the idea is that kind of builds you up into your dissertation in last year, which is a similar kind of project to the second year one, but obviously larger scale, and you do it over a longer period. So yeah, all of the exams are kind of just paper exams, but each year you'll do one kind of coursework thing, but it will get bigger and bigger, you know, kind of building up and preparing you to do a dissertation in final year.
Nice. So is the first year like quite comprehensive? Like, do people leave it feeling like they've got a good grounding in economics now?
Yeah, I think it definitely kind of sets the tone for, or as well as they can, for all the different areas of economics. You know, you get kind of the politics side, you get history, you get the math side, you get micro and macro, which is applied maths kind of. So even the micro and macro is taught very much in a mathematical way. And I think that sets you up well to then choose what you want to study. For example, for myself, I think my skills and my interests and what I enjoy more is kind of the math side of things rather than essays, you know, history or politics. So I haven't taken any history or politics modules afterwards, but I probably wouldn't have known that as well if I hadn't kind of done those modules in first year. So I think first year is quite important just to get a sense of, you know, which areas of economics you enjoy, not just, you know, to influence what you want to do for second and third year, but also, you know, for your own personal interest, what you want to read about, potentially what kind of line of work you want to go into. So yeah, I think the first year is definitely very important.
Nice. So out of curiosity as well, what's like your dissertation?
Yeah, so I mean, I wanted to kind of, as I said before, the thing I really value or what I look for is things that are practical or that are relevant to what I'll be doing in the future or what I'm interested in. And as I said, I'll be going into finance, specifically asset management. So I wanted to do something related to that. So I knew I wanted to look at something to do with kind of equities and the stock market. And for your dissertation, you have to kind of tie it slightly to one of the modules that you're studying, most likely kind of in final year. And I'm doing, as I said, I'm doing banking and finance in final year. So the link there was kind of clear. So what I ended up deciding on is I wanted to look at the effect of a government policy, a particular type of policy on the stock market. And so kind of, you know, going down that pathway led me to the question of what the effect of quantitative easing is, which is a type of monetary policy, on volatility in the stock market. So it's a bit of a mouthful maybe to say at first, but essentially quantitative easing is a kind of monetary policy. It's a bit of an unconventional one, which is why I thought it would be interesting. And I want to look at the effect it has on the volatility of returns in the stock market, because, you know, I'll be looking at equities after university. So I'm kind of like probably midway through the process at the moment. Nice. So really enjoying it, and yeah.
Yeah, nice. Is there like a historical example that we might know, like that where like a government policy has affected the stock market by quite a large amount?
Yeah, I mean, I think a very good example is obviously the 2008 financial crisis, which even if people haven't studied economics or read about a lot, they would have probably at least heard of. So that's actually a very good example, because that's one of the situations where the US Federal Reserve, which is, I'm looking at the US, they implemented quantitative easing. And so that's actually a very good example where there ended up being a big spike upwards in volatility after certain announcements. So what I'm doing is called essentially an event study. And what I do is I look at all the announcements of quantitative easing. So whenever the Federal Reserve has said, okay, we're now going to implement quantitative easing, or we've been implementing it, we're going to change it slightly, I look at those announcements and look, you know, the days surrounding those announcements, has volatility gone up or down? So, and what I found is typically around those announcements, there has been an increase in volatility, but only when the announcements are surprising. Because obviously, you know, before governments or the Federal Reserve or the Bank of England or these sort of institutions make announcements, people have their own expectations. So what I'm specifically looking for in my diss is I'm looking at whether the level of surprise in one of those announcements affects volatility, or whether it's just the announcement itself that kind of affects it. So I've kind of actually gotten to a stage now where I'm just about getting my results, and what I found, which I think is probably intuitive as well, is, you know, if they make an announcement for quantitative easing, since that's what I'm looking at, and it's not surprising, it's kind of what the market was expecting, it doesn't really affect volatility. Whereas if it's surprising in a positive or negative way, it ends up affecting volatility by increasing it. So yeah, that's kind of the approach I've taken. And in terms of, an example of it, the 2008 financial crisis is probably quite a good one.
Nice, yeah. That's really interesting. And I guess that's useful for governments to know if they're going to announce something that they know the market would find surprising. Yeah,
exactly. And I think that I found some really good surveys. You know, for your dissertation, you have to do so much data collection, especially for economics. You know, I think some other subjects are slightly different. You know, maybe politics or English, you do a lot of reading, and then you kind of start writing earlier on, even from, you know, kind of Michaelmas term, which is the first term at Cambridge. Whereas for economics, you know, the majority of it is collecting data, merging data, which takes ages, then doing some coding on this software Stata that we use, which is fairly intuitive, but it just takes a long time. So, we're now at the start of Lent at the time of recording, and I'm just about getting my results now, and only soon in the next kind of week or so will I begin really planning and writing. The majority of it is just collecting data and figuring out exactly how you're going to do your analysis, because, if you do the analysis wrong, it doesn't matter what you write. You're really marked on the method that you use and whether it's correct and whether it's implemented correctly. So yeah.
Nice. That's quite interesting, because a lot of people, I think they would think of economics as the essay-based writing is important, as well as like the math sides. But I think when people think of maths, they think of like problem solving, but they don't think of the methodology, as you were saying, or like the data collecting part of the degree.
Yeah.
And how like important it is to be quite accurate when you're collecting data, because that could have that would have an effect on whatever you write.
Yeah, and I think that's a big change. From A level, I did maths and further maths at A level, and it's very much you kind of just get given a problem and you solve it. Whereas obviously at university you develop those skills a bit more, especially in economics. But then the reason you're developing them is so you can apply them, so you can implement statistical methods and run regressions and do all sorts of data analysis, because the skills themselves aren't useful unless you apply them. So I think that's probably one of the most important transitions going, from studying those subjects we said were relevant, economics, physics, maths, further maths, to then using them in university. You have to apply them a bit more. But obviously you're kind of taught that throughout the lectures. You even have courses or seminars specifically about using the coding software that you'll use for your dissertation and projects and that kind of stuff. So it is taught in a way where you are able to pick it up fairly quickly. But yeah, it does come as, maybe a bit of a shock and a change compared to what you would have been doing at A level.
Nice. And moving towards how like the teaching styles in Cambridge, how are economists taught at Cambridge? Is it through problem sheets or essays, and you're mentioning coding, like what kind of things would you be doing?
Yeah, I think the short answer is it involves both, a bit of everything. But I'd probably say the majority of it is problem solving, but there are also essays as well. So some modules which I mentioned, history, politics, are very obviously just essays. They're just taught through essays. There's some modules which are then explicitly maths, so econometrics modules. In first year, you have quantitative methods module. And then the rest of them, which are kind of like micro, macro, you have a labour module in second year. Generally speaking, the rest of them, except those which I mentioned, will be majority problem solving, but there will also be an essay component as well. So I'd say maybe 80% problem solving, and then there'll also be some essays or like extended writing part of it, and that's, in the way you're taught with your supervisions, but also in the final exam, it'll be mainly problem solving and explaining your answers, but there'll also be an essay question at the end. So yeah, that's kind of it. History, politics would be explicitly essays. There's a few modules which are explicitly maths, and then the rest are majority maths, problem solving, but there's still definitely kind of an essay component part of them as well.
Nice. And you were mentioning there about the supervisions. So like, for anyone who doesn't know, like supervisions are quite Cambridge and Oxford specific in they're like seminars or classes, but the ratios tend to be 1:2 or 1:3 between students and teacher. How have you found your economic supervisions?
Yeah, I think they're really useful. Obviously, it makes the workload maybe slightly more intense compared to other universities where you don't have supervisions. But I think that's a really important part of the learning process, and they really help clarify anything you're confused about from lectures. They essentially force you to do kind of practice questions, but so you don't end up doing them too late, just before exams.
Yeah.
And I guess in terms of how they're kind of structured, I'd say we have probably, first to give some context, we have maybe 2 supervisions a week on average. For each piece of supervision work, you'll probably have 2 weeks kind of to work on it and have to hand it in a day or two, maybe on average, before the supervision. And the way they normally work is you submit the work, usually a problem sheet with maybe one essay, or if it's history, politics, just an essay. And then in the supervision, you essentially just, the supervisor, it'll be them and maybe, like you said, I've had up to 4 students in it before. So yeah, 1 to 4 students, normally 2 to 4. And the supervisor will kind of just go through the questions one by one, working through the solutions, and then stopping along the way to clarify any questions that students have. They would have marked your work as well. So if everyone made a mistake on a particular part, you'll really kind of zoom in and focus on that. And in my experience as well, what the supervisors tend to try to do is go through the parts of this the problem sheet, which is directly related to the lecture quite quickly, because the first few questions or parts of questions will just be a direct application of what you learned in the lecture. So if people don't really have that much of a problem with that, you kind of go through that relatively quickly. And then what the supervisor will want to focus on is the questions or the question parts which kind of extend and build upon the lecture, so you get even more knowledge which you can use to kind of show off in your exams, was just kind of useful more generally. Obviously there'll inevitably be times where people struggle with what was taught in lectures, and so maybe even get the application questions wrong, in which case obviously you focus on that a bit more, because that's the kind of bread and butter you need for exams. But I think the supervisors tend to try to efficiently teach you the stuff from the lectures, but then also go and really focus on the questions which extend beyond the lectures, because that's how you end up learning a bit more, rather than just repeating what was taught in the lectures.
Yeah, of course. And I imagine if like the ratio, if there was 10 students with one academic compared to like 2 students and one academic, you wouldn't be able to get as many questions in if there were more students in the supervision.
No, I think that's why it's so valuable, and my advice, especially to anyone that gets into Cambridge, is really to make the most of that, because I think also once you're here for a while, you can almost forget, I guess, the opportunity you have there, because you're sitting down with top academics who are experts in their field. And so the chance to ask them questions is so valuable. And what I do, for example, before my supervisions is, even when I'm doing the work before it's being marked, as I'm answering the question, is if there's any part I'm uncertain of, I just grab like a separate piece of paper and note down, okay, for this question I want to ask my supervisor this. And so that way I have a record of what I want to ask, take that into the supervision, and so I can just kind of get through those questions. And they're always happy to help, which I think is really nice of them. But yeah, it is pretty crazy when you think about it, because you're just kind of sat there with these top academics, and you're here for a while, and you almost forget. I think even the other day I was looking on, I was on LinkedIn, and then I saw one of my professors who also ended up being a supervisor in second year got nominated for some high award, and I just forget, like, I'm with these people every day in supervisions or in lectures, and I think remembering the opportunity you have there and making the most of it, like you said, through asking questions is really important.
Yeah, but it also says something about the experience being normalized and not really even noticing that they're high flying academics and they're kind of like just people there to help you. It says a lot about the quality of support that you have in your degree when you're studying in Cambridge.
Yeah, I mean, they're all just super nice, come across as regular people. They'll speak to you even on a more regular level about things not related to academics. One of my supervisors also like referees some college football games, and I play college football, so I speak to him about that a lot of the time after supervision. So it's a really nice environment, I think, to learn in. But of course, within that, you have to make sure you're kind of focused on making the most of it as well. But I think there's definitely that kind of balance between the two.
Nice. So with regards to applying for universities, like what other unis did you apply to alongside Cambridge?
Yeah, I mean, off the top of my head, I mean, you can only apply obviously to one of Cambridge or Oxford, so I ended up going for Cambridge. But on top of that, I applied, I think, to LSE, Warwick, Durham, and then I think my 5th university was Bath. So I think as a lot of students naturally would, so I don't think it's something I even need to say, but obviously researching universities, if you can, you're going to visit them, open days, that kind of stuff is really important, because you'll be there for 3 years, so making sure it's a course you enjoy, the university, the city is somewhere where you'd like to be, is quite important. So yeah, those are the universities I ended up applying to, and obviously Cambridge was kind of my top choice, so I really made sure to try my hardest in the application process, and luckily the work paid off.
Nice, yeah, congrats. With applying to choosing between Oxford and Cambridge, because Oxford they don't offer straight economics. The course is economics and management. How did you choose between the 2 courses?
Yeah, it was definitely a tough decision. I definitely considered both. I mean, I for me, there was kind of like a trade-off between the two. I mentioned how the Cambridge course is very maths-based, and that's something that I enjoy and that I think is suited to my skills. So that was one aspect that kind of, pulled me towards Cambridge. And then in terms of the economics and management course at Oxford, my impression at least is, the management side sounded, and from when I looked into it, seemed like something quite practical and useful in that sense. And again, I mentioned earlier, that's something I also found quite valuable and important. So there was definitely kind of a trade-off in having to choose one. I felt like I was going to be giving up a valuable aspect from the other course. In terms of what ended up, making me go for Cambridge, I think one thing is I ended up visiting both. I think I went on a school trip to Oxford, and then I came up to Cambridge with my mum as well, and I slightly kind of preferred Cambridge, although of course I'll say that I'm here now. So, but yeah, maybe that was a small part of it. But I think the biggest thing is, my thought process was kind of, maybe there is some more, practicality and usefulness from that Oxford course, at least, the management side, or at least it appears that way to me. But I also thought, the most useful, valuable, practical things I'll learn will be from, internships I hopefully do during university, societies I'm involved in, relevant to kind of the work I want to do. So then I thought, if I'll be getting all of those lessons from there, then I guess the course and like the theoretical part of the course is maybe more important and what I should think about a bit more. And in that sense, as I said, the maths aspect of Cambridge, and it's also very theoretical as well, is something I kind of lent towards. So I'd say that was probably the deciding factor for why I went to Cambridge.
So in that in the Cambridge course, you can get the theoretical stuff and the math skills, and you could make up the lack of management area with like internships and to build up your practical experience that way. Is that what you're?
Yeah, I mean, I should say, like, there's still practical aspects in the Cambridge course. For example, like I said, I'm doing banking and finance in my final year, which is very practical and useful module. There's other ones as well. But yeah, I mean, I think whichever university you go to, and this is, again, general advice, but I think getting involved with societies for your own interests, and there's plenty of societies at every university, is really important. I've got involved with the Student Investment Fund here for the past 2 years because that's related to the area that I wanted and I'm going to go work in. So I think that's really where you can get the most valuable skills, even down to, interpersonal skills, teamwork, public speaking, those kind of skills are equally important, and that you're not really going to learn, sitting in a lecture hall. So I'd say for those more practical skills, I think getting involved with societies and those kinds of things is just as important. And then, the theoretical side is very much present at Cambridge. You learn a lot of models from the ground up. And I think that is very valuable too, because like I mentioned earlier, you need to know the entire thought process and intuition behind results and things that you see. And the Cambridge course definitely gives you that. And I thought, okay, well, I'll be looking to do internships, I'll get involved with these societies, and that's why I can maybe make up for any parts that the course is lacking in.
Nice. And I'm not sure if Cambridge offer this, but I know Oxford do. They you can apply to do history and economics. And for someone who's kind of wanting to study economics, but they also they want to study economic history and they're thinking about history and economics, can you do would you be able to do economic history through studying the economics course at Cambridge?
Yeah, I mean, in first year, there's obviously the compulsory module, which is on British economic history. And then through second and third year, you'll have plenty of history and politics modules available. And second year, you have one optional module. Third year, you have two. So if you want to, you'd definitely be able to study history or politics throughout the entire 3 years.
Nice. I think that's really interesting. And for a lot of prospective students, they won't realise that when they just see the title economics at Cambridge. They don't realise that you'd be able to do you could carve a history, more history oriented pathway, or more politics oriented pathway, which is, I think, shows the breadth and opportunity that you can that there is for the economics course at Cambridge.
Yeah, I mean, I think, definitely, because I think I mentioned even how the course is very maths based. I think people hearing that might initially go, oh, well, then I can't really study history or politics there, or even if I do, it'll be a very small part of the course. So that's why I also want to send the message, there's plenty of, breadth in the course as well, so with regards to studying history or politics. And even though it's not necessarily the area that I've gone for or I have that much knowledge on, I would recommend, anyone who wants to learn about that, do reach out to students at Cambridge who maybe you can see. Often they'll put on their LinkedIn maybe what modules they're studying in each year. You can reach out and ask them what the history and politics modules are like, exactly what they study, and then you can find out, whether the history parts of the course are something that would interest you. And if that's the case, then perfect. Then there's definitely enough opportunity for you to study history or politics as well.
Nice. And now talking about different career paths that economics students can go on after studying at Cambridge, could you give us a brief overview of what careers that economists I can't speak economic students can go on to after Cambridge, and then what you're planning on doing as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said earlier, I think economics in general is very useful. The intuition and the thought processes that you develop are very useful, and so can be applied in a lot of different areas. But in terms of the most typical ones, I mean, a lot of people, end up applying to, finance, whether that's investment banking, asset management, Some end up going to private equity consulting as well, which is kind of a lot more, I guess, on the management side. So a lot of people end up applying to that. Even a lot of people outside of economics, a lot of people studying natural sciences also end up applying for those kinds of roles.
Yeah.
So see, those are kind of like the most common. There are also plenty of other ones as well. You can go end up working in like the UN, for example. Plenty of people end up doing just management roles within regular companies within loads of different industries. You can be in a management or a finance role within, a shoe selling company or a pharma company or wherever. So I think the skills are quite broad, which I think is good. It lets you apply to a lot of different areas. But yeah, I think by far the most common is the finance applications, and it's quite a high workload, to be honest, alongside the Cambridge course. But a lot of people kind of want to go into it.
So what do you mean by that? Like, what kind of workloads would that be alongside your degree? Like, is that like applying for internships or?
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly that, applying for internships, and obviously when you get into third year, applying for jobs, because I mean the process is quite a tough one. And my other advice to people who are going to be applying for that, whether they're studying economics or not, because like I said, there's people outside of economics who will be applying for those roles, is plenty of universities, obviously they have a career service and they offer support, but a lot of it ends up being on you. So the earlier or the more intense you can be, trying to find out information exactly what the application process is like and kind of preparing for it, you put yourself on a bit of a better path. So, the application process involves obviously, applying to so many, and I mean hundreds, CVs you have to send, cover letters, you have to do phone interviews, online tests, you then have to do assessment centers, going in person and doing tasks for the company, online interviews, all sorts of things. So it's just a very long process, especially when you have so many applications to do because so many other people are applying. So doing that at times, it can be, quite disheartening. It can take you ages to get an internship or to get a role. And it's something you just have to kind of, keep going along the path of whilst you're studying, which is just, tough to manage, especially when you're in exams or your first year at Cambridge, but, trying to get used to the climate here. But like I said, it's just kind of a long process, and eventually it does pay off. And the important thing is, putting yourself in a good position to be successful by getting involved with society, speaking to others, learning about the process. And for me, it was something that I wasn't that aware of going into university. So I kind of had a bit of a shock to the system of just how intense it would be. And I made loads and loads of mistakes when I was first applying for internships. I remember showing someone my CV to try and get some advice, and they were just like, "What the hell is this? This is terrible." So you'll kind of make mistakes, but the earlier you can kind of get them out of the way, the earlier you can maybe get an internship or get a job, and then obviously that takes a lot of pressure kind of off your shoulders for the rest of your studies.
Nice. So for anyone who's like listening and they're wanting to go into finance and they who do they talk? How do you find out about these internships? Like, especially in first year, like, is it through a society? Is it through Googling? Is it through LinkedIn? Like, how would you know about these internships to apply for?
Yeah, and there's so many things. I'll try to think about the most important things first. So, first of all, in terms of the first thing is knowing where to apply and what to apply to. So there's something really good now. They have a lot of trackers online, spreadsheets. There's loads of different ones which tell you, there'll be one for first years, one for second years, one for third years, saying all these companies have internships. This is when the application opens, this is when it ends, this is what their application process involves. And I think the best one, at least I've come across, it used to be called Bristol Tracker. It might just be called Tracker now. But that, for example, is just a massive spreadsheet. It'll tell you, okay, if you're a first year and you're applying for spring weeks, which is like the first kind of a 1 week internship you can get, these are all the ones that have spaces. This is when they open, this is when they close, this is what you need to do to apply. Here's a link to go and apply. So if you want to find out where and what to apply to, that's where you go, and that's very easy to manage. And I think they also even have it for law and some other roles as well. So that's the first thing. Definitely go there to find out where you can apply. In terms of preparing for the application process, like I said, from those kind of spreadsheets, you can see exactly what the application process involves. I think one thing is speaking to people, reaching out to people who have got internships, gotten roles, and ask them, okay, so what was your application process like? And then asking them questions about each stage so you can learn where to apply to. Another thing is getting involved in student societies. That will make you look good on your CV. You also develop some of those skills and the knowledge you need for interviews and for the online tests. So yeah, I think that those are the most important things. So I guess maybe quickly to summarize, because it can be a lot, I think use those trackers to see where you need to apply to.
And they're like massive spreadsheets.
Yeah, they're essentially a massive spreadsheet, and you can obviously edit it yourself as well, download it for yourself and edit when you fill them in. So use those spreadsheets to see where to apply to, speak to people to find out exactly what's involved in each application, in each part of the application process, and then try to develop your skills. So CV and cover letter, speak with people who've got internships, ask them to check, can you just look at my CV? Is this okay? For online tests, there's also, what's the website called? I think it's Job Test Prep or Prep Job or something like, I think it's Job Test Prep, which you can do. And they have a lot of the online tests that different companies do, and you can practice on there. For interviews, obviously doing mock interviews, getting involved with societies will build up your knowledge so you can answer questions, and finding those kind of online resources through Google. I'd say those are the kind of the three most important things: knowing where to apply, finding out exactly what's involved in each one by speaking to people, and then practicing through online sites, doing mock interviews, getting involved with societies. That will make you kind of a good applicant for these roles and internships.
Nice. And those trackers, do they have them for like graduate jobs as well?
Yeah, they do. I mean, I think I can speak first of all about the finance ones. They have, so Spring Weeks is the first internship you can get in first year, which is in Easter. It's kind of like a 1 week one. So they have them for that. They have it also for a few places that do first year summer internships. It's not that many that have official programs. So for those, I can give a bit of advice. What I did was I just emailed a lot of smaller companies who don't maybe have official programs and asked, I'm super keen to, get involved and learn more about the industry. You could have some experience there. And often, some of them will get back to you, maybe offer you kind of like an interview or something like that to see if you can go there. They have it for second year summer internships. And then, they also have it for grad roles as well, and also some off-cycle internship programs. So they're really, really useful. And I think it's something that didn't really exist, I think 10 years ago. I'm not sure exactly when they were created, but it makes the process a lot easier. So especially if someone who's just about to go into university or in the summer between A-levels and university, looking at those just to get a sense of how many you need to apply to and what it involves is probably a good starting point.
Nice. And about careers more generally, how is the Cambridge Career Service useful?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously they have a career service. They send out a lot of emails with different roles. They also have speakers come in from different companies or different positions and tell you about their career path. And I think those are useful to go to just hear from as many people as possible about how their career went, because it goes different for everyone, and there's so many different paths even to the same final role or destination. So I think going to those is quite useful. But I think the biggest driver of your own career has to be you, and I think that makes sense. And you want to try and help yourself as much as possible. And just my advice would just be proactive. Don't wait, even though there is a career service. Don't kind of just wait. I think that will kind of solve things for you. I think that the most important thing is to go out there yourself, look for jobs through those trackers, speak to people to try and get advice and prepare for interviews and tests and jobs and everything. So that would be my biggest piece of advice: be proactive. But there is a career service which is very useful, and that's another source, for example, to look for internships and jobs, so you know where you can be applying to.
Yeah, and they do have a lot of information. But I think it does sound like to go into to guarantee your place in the finance world, you have to be quite proactive, and I think a lot of prospective students will find like the steps that you've laid out very useful. Because I think, even though I'm a graduate and I studied at uni for like several years, I'd never had a real interest in going into the finance industry, but I didn't know to this day how to until you later explained it. So I think a lot of prospective students will find that useful. Well, thanks, Nikola. That was a really interesting conversation about economics. I think hopefully this will help students decide whether they want to choose economics. And thanks for the viewers for listening, whether that's on YouTube or our podcasting platform. We'll see you guys next time.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you for having me.
Nice. Cool. How did you find that?
Yeah, it was good. I enjoyed it. Hopefully people find it useful as well. I mean, for me, it's definitely, especially the application.